Now, the other reason we use methods is because methods can be used over and over again. We can call methods and use them in the same kind of way for very similar reasons, but to spit out slightly different data. And we're going to talk about that again in just a minute here. So we have our method from our previous example where we talked about who won and we calculated who won the game with our parameters here. So now we're going to go ahead and write a method for determining the final number of rebounds. And we're going to do this for any team. We're going to make this kind of generic, but we want to, if you are reporting something on a basketball game, you may want to know the number of rebounds, the number of assists for the game. You may want to know it by quarter. You may want to add it up for the whole game. So there are a number of types of statistics you may want to figure out for a game. And here's a great example where a method might fit in. So we have our method signature here, and we have our method, the name, we're going to call it calculate total rebounds. And this is going to be for any team. We're going to be able to apply it to more than one team, to any team we want to apply it to. And we're going to have it return an integer, right? So it's going to return an integer, and that's going to be the return type for us, is a number we wanted to return, because we wanted to calculate the total number of rebounds. And we set up our parameters, and we have 4 parameters here, and they're each going to be integers. And I just gave it placeholders, so that's what we're doing with parameters. We're saying placeholders. We're going to have an integer here as a placeholder. I'm going to call it quarter 1, something that makes sense, right? And then integer quarter 2, integer quarter 3, and integer quarter 4. So we have 4 parameters here, 4 integers, and that's what our method is going to take. And we're going to simply say that the final rebounds, which is the variable we're going to set up, is going to be equal to your Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3 plus Q4. So the number of rebounds in each quarter. And that's going to be with the final rebounds. And we're going to return the result. The result is going to be, we're going to call it final rebounds, and we're going to return that, and that's going to be an integer, and that's going to be returned in our system when we call it. So let's take a look at it. That's going to be our return type, an integer. Let's take a look at that when we take these 4 quarters, if you will, and add up total number of rebounds. So I'll go down here to this part of our main method. We're in the main method here, and we're going to call this calculate total rebounds. So I have right here rebounds for the seals. And I went ahead and set up some variables so we can use them in this way. And I have Q1 rebounds, Q2, Q3, and I assign values. And we're passing those values into each of the parameters that we set up for this method, right? There's four parameters set up. So let's say they had 9 rebounds each of the first 2 quarters, and then 8 rebounds the last 2 quarters. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a variable here, call it an integer, and I'm going to have it hold this method, right? Have it put into this method, and the calculate rebounds, we're calling it because we're using the parentheses, and we're going to go ahead and pass it values. And since we've assigned values to these variables, we're going to go ahead and pass it for Q1. We're going to pass it a 9 for Q2, a 9 for Q3, and an 8 for Q3, and an 8 for Q4. And it's going to treat these values, the system we just set up, just like it did in this placeholder that we set up here. It's going to treat them just like it did and perform these functions on it, if you will, as a part of our program. So what we did is we went ahead and we passed it in to each one of these parameters here, each one of these values, to each one of these parameters, passed it in these values to it. And then, we're going to say the total number of rebounds for the seals was, and we're going to print out this variable. We're just holding this result of our method. And the good thing about it is we don't have to just do this for the seals. We had 2 teams in here. We want to calculate the rebounds for the doggies. So I went ahead and for the other team and created integers, some variables here, and gave it passed in their number of rebounds that they had for each quarter. So they had, let's say, 9 in the first quarter, 2 in the second quarter, 8 in the third, and 8 in the fourth, right? And I went ahead and set up a variable that's going to hold this information. It's going to basically hold and return the result of this method. And I went ahead and say, hey, for this Q1, we have doggies rebound was 9 for Q1, for quarter 1. For Q2 was 2 rebounds, and then 8 for Q3 and 8 for Q4. And it's going to treat it just like it's supposed to treat it in this calculate total rebounds for this method. And I want to print out the total number of rebounds for the dogs was whatever that result is, whatever that number turns out to be. So I can use the same method in different ways and different times in our program, and you can see how this might be very useful in real life, right? You're using the same method, and you're calling on the same method for the result of this information for both teams, for different teams. So I'm going to go up here and run this right here as we call the same method for both sets of data. And as you might imagine, this calculate total rebounds, it calculated total rebounds for the seals, which was 34. And then we went ahead and we called it as well for the dogs. We called it for the doggies, and it calculated total rebounds for the dogs to be 27. So this same method, we used the exact same method that we set up here, calculate total rebounds, and these parameters, and we simply just passed in different values into this same method to spit out different information for us for the dogs and for the seals. So you can kind of see that if you are a programmer, and let's say you're writing a program for a team, you may want to know assists, you may want to know blocks per game, you may want to know steals. You can use a very similar type of setup to be able to call and use different data to give you the same types of results for different pieces of information that you want. So I just wanted to share that with you, and this is why we use methods, and this is why it can kind of be great to use. You can kind of chunk out your information and chunk out your code, and if you end up having a problem, you know where to go back to and kind of debug it and check, well, is it a problem with this? What's going on with this? Is it a problem with something else? It makes it easier for you to check your code as well when you kind of separate out and chunk it out this way. So we'll talk more about some more things in a minute.